takes more than a stripped engine and all the necessary parts to build up a flying fortress engine into a fighting machine. It takes a group of good mechanics who know their stuff. That's why we want you to get acquainted with some of these boys, because they do know their stuff. Meet Ott, the corporal.
Howdy.
Pinky, PFC.
Hiya.
And Chuck, who is busy right now washing all oil off hoses and fittings in a cleaning solvent before reusing. Otherwise, the connections may blow off in flight. And Mel, the crew chief.
Stick around, fellows, and watch us go through our routine. And remember, it's not done with mirrors.
It's done with know-how and labor. Naturally, the first thing to do is get the engine out of the box by removing the 4 bolts at the bottom.
The blind spline on the propeller shaft is usually placed so the spline faces the bottom of the engine when mounted on the airplane.
Okay, Chuck, lift her up. Bring in the stand, Pinky. That's it. A little more.
These boys are thankful they have a stand handy. What now, Mel?
The anti-icer nozzle mounts to these 2 studs, which, if they were numerals on a clock, would be approximately 2 or 3 o'clock. I'm always careful to get the nozzle on correctly, never upside down or off angle. And I get it seated firmly. Then I tighten it to the specific torque values as given in the tech order.
The nozzle is installed and the job is safetied. Now for the magneto harness. To ensure having a joint which will keep out moisture, the knurled nuts must be more than finger tight. Certain flight and humidity conditions will cause moisture to condense within the harness.
It's drained here, Ott.
I see, Sarge.
Hand me a drill.
Here you are, Sarge.
If the harness isn't drained, water will often cause ignition trouble at high altitudes. A small drill does the trick.
How small?
1/8 of an inch or smaller. It's a good thing to consult tech order 08-5-1.
Ott checks the inter-cylinder shields. These baffles direct the slipstream over the cylinder fins to cool the engine.
Baffles are okay, Sarge.
Attaboy, Ott. Go after the Audison fittings while Pinky replaces the silica gel plugs with these dummy plugs. Here's your dummy plug, Pinky.
Fair exchange.
The elbow terminal is attached to the dummy plug. To keep the cable in hand until regular plugs are installed.
When I remove the silica gel plug in the sump drain, I let the pickling oil drain into a pan. Then I take out the regular sump drain plug, which is magnetized, and, oh, by the way, the important thing about this plug is the magnet, which attracts particles that get down into the sump. It's a means of checking for internal engine trouble. Pickling oil is never reused, so out it goes. Okay, boys, swing her around so the audience can get a rear view of the engine. Ott, you start removing the plugs from the oil and manifold pressure Audisons.
Hand me that fitting, Pinky.
Here you are, Ott.
Pinky applies thread lubricant to make the fittings easier to install and remove later on. Ott installs the oil pressure fitting. Then he caps the manifold pressure fitting, which is already installed, and seals the oil pressure fitting. This takes care of the 2 fittings to the transmitter line. Now to tighten the blower section vent plug securely and add a bit of safety wire. Now Ott tackles the rosebud distributor, which supplies fuel to the upper 5 cylinders when starting the engine. The feeder line to number 3 cylinder interferes with the air seal when the air seal is installed. Therefore, Ott switches it and seals the open part. He makes certain that the rosebud mounting is secure and that the 5 feeder lines clear the baffle and bell cranks without danger of chafing. He also makes sure the clamps, which help to absorb engine vibration, hold the feeder line tightly. Pinky, on the left, now installs the breather tube, which ventilates the crankcase while it's easy to get at. He attaches it with clamps to the intake manifold of number 9 cylinder for security. Then he removes the engine stud nuts in preparation for the air seal ring. He scrapes the paint from the base of its mounting studs to make a good bonding surface when the air seal is installed.
That's good, Pinky. Now, off with the scavenger line, so you and Ott can install the air seal, which goes on in 2 sections. This air seal is handy in the event of an engine fire. Now I can replace the scavenger line. You'll notice I always use a special type key wrench to tighten the scavenger line clamps. Now to install the accessories. Ott starts with the starter. Off with the cover plate, Ott. Here's the starter. Get her all cleaned up.
Cleaned and inspected, Sarge.
Attaboy. Sometimes dirt, scratches, nicks, or oil leakage are found. I always make sure, of course, the starter is properly grounded. And whenever possible, I use new gaskets in installing accessories on the engine.
Pinky now tightens the supercharger in fitting on the oil pump. Ott removes the plug for the supercharger regulator outfitting. But the fitting is so long that it can't be installed until this oil pump check valve and Cuno strainer are out of the way. What do you say, Pinky?
A spring pops out when removing the check valve. See it?
How about you, Ott?
When removing the Cuno, I'm always careful not to damage the discs. Once the strainer is out of the way, the fitting goes on easily. Pinky tightens the fitting. I put the strainer back in. Now the check valve can be replaced. Then I finish the job with safety wire.
And a good job it was, Ott. I'll go after the oil in and out lines. Here are the plugs.
Here's the oil in fitting, Sarge. And here's the oil out fitting.
Attaboy.
The fixed cowling and engine mount are separate units, but are easily installed as one.
Bring in the cowling, fellas. Get the top up over the carburetor pad. Rotate it slightly to clear a part of the engine blower section. Now, I'll line up the cowling for insertion of the 9 hold-down bolts. I make sure the engine rubber mounts are still in good condition and draw tightly so there'll be no undue play. Then, I torque the hold-down bolts to 375 inch-pounds. 4 bonding straps are necessary for grounding. After scraping all paint away from around the stud, I attach the strap securely. Good grounding prevents static in the airplane's radio equipment.
Prop pressure line, Sarge. Bring her in, Chuck, and I'll put her on.
Around goes the engine again, so you can see Pinky and Chuck put on the prop pressure line. There are 3 sections, a rubber hose section and a tubing section in the rear, and this front section, which is tubing enclosed in lagging. Now's a good time to install the prop governor. So Ott starts to remove the cover plate. Off with the nuts. Pinky cuts the safety wire. Then Ott proceeds to tighten the one plug that must be tightened before mounting the governor. This plug interferes with the proper seating of the governor. Ott removes the shipping gasket. Mel places the proper gasket on right and tight. Otherwise, there'll be a nasty oil leak at this point.
Hand me the prop governor, Chuck. It's not ordinarily installed until after first engine run, because the rust preventive from the engine gums it up. But we'll do it now just to show them how it's done.
While I'm tightening this pressure line out, you can start removing that plug for the external oil supply line.
Attaboy. I'll safety this pressure line elbow. And now I can install the fitting for the external prop feathering line. Ott, you take care of the line from the rear. That's right. Attach your line and tighten it up.
After cutting the surplus safety wire for the external line lagging, Mel starts rigging the pitch control cable to the prop governor. Chuck is helping him behind the scenes. Down below, Pinky gets busy on the anti-icer nozzle. An elbow fitting is necessary. It connects the anti-icer nozzle to its respective line, which comes through the engine rear. Pinky makes sure it won't vibrate against the baffle. Mel installs the cable to the prop governor pressure switch, and Chuck strings it through to the engine rear. By the way, these ring nuts can easily be broken if tightened too much.
Swing her around again, fellas.
You make a pretty good kibitzer, Sarge.
None of your back talk, Ott. Cut that cover plate off. It's time now to install the generator. Attaboy. Now clean the drive, Ott. We don't want any dirt or defects. Okay. Chuck, bring in the generator. Let me check the spline.
Always consult tech order 02-35-1 before tightening accessory nuts with a torque wrench.
After the generator is installed, the fuel pump can come next. All 4 engines have an individually mounted fuel pump on the right-hand side of the rear section.
Here's your pump, Ott.
Thanks, Sarge.
Rotate the shaft and check for binding. All pumps have been turned over by hand to ensure free operation. Vacuum pumps in particular.
Pinky starts to install the thermocouple lead with the aid of Chuck. The lead is strung through the fixed cowling from the engine rear. Chuck takes the spring off the baffle in order to get the thermocouple lead where it belongs. There are 2 openings on the top of the engine rear section to vent this compartment to the oil tank. This one and this one. Now down to Ott to watch him install the blower drain fitting. Pinky comes in to go after the Glycol pump. The nuts off first, then the cover plate. The dummy spline in the drive is not needed, so Pinky gets rid of it.
You know what? That Glycol pump is mounted with the nameplate upside down. Looks topsy-turvy, but it's right. By the way, the Glycol pump is found only on the number 2 engine.
Now is as good a time as any to install the drain fitting. Ott takes care of it. Next, the vacuum pump. Off with the cover plate, and out comes the dummy spline.
How's about the vacuum pump, Chuck? Good. This spline shaft has been machined to break at this point if the pump should fail, and prevents damage to the drive itself. The vacuum pump is installed only on a number 2 and number 3 engine. On the number 2 engine, the pump must be placed with the in and out fittings on the bottom. Then the open ends of the fittings are sealed.
A severed primer line can lead to a nasty engine fire, so Mel makes sure this one is on securely. Down we go to get a look at the Magneto blast tubes. There's a blast tube for each magneto. They supply air from the prop wash for cooling the magnetos. The tubes lead through from the front and join the magnetos by hose connections and clamps, which Chuck tightens. What's next on the list, Mel?
The carburetor. Here we are.
With the dehydrator and gasket assembly out of the way, we can check the induction drain tube. It has to be mighty secure so it won't vibrate loose.
The gasket goes over the studs, like so. Say, how'd the camera get in there?
The slushing compound has been removed from the carburetor and drain plugs replaced and safetied. Here comes Ott to get busy on the exhaust collector ring, which is built up in 8 sections.
Ott removes the cover plate only when he's ready to install one of the sections. He builds the ring up from the bottom, starting with the Y section. Pinky gets the next section ready by removing the cover plate. Each additional section is tightened with a connecting clamp. This is done before the mounting bolts are drawn tight. After the section has been bolted tight, Ott loosens the connection clamp just enough so it can be turned by hand. These clamps will be rechecked after engine run-up. Looks as if Mel has a word to say.
Yeah, Ott. Give me a hand with this air duct shroud. Once on, it'll make it easier for you to go on with your exhaust ring. That's right. Cover plate off, and the top section goes on smoothly. Give her another swing, boys, and we'll attack from the rear again. Let's remove the dummy Y from each magneto end. Pinky, give us the booster-plex. We'll connect it to the magnetos. Ott, you attach the bonding straps to the ground mags. I'll tighten the clamp. Now, cover the Y connection opening in the mag. That's it. We need about 2 feet of this mag wire. Here you are, Ott. Good. Now let's string the wire through this flex cable sheathing to prevent radio interference. The job's just about done. A bit of soldering on this plug terminal. And then the end of the plug is sealed, like this.
And a good job it was, Mel. Ott and Pinky finish off the job by tightening the bonding straps on both mags. These 2 rubber hose lines connect the Ottoson on the firewall to the engine manifold and oil pressure fittings. Mel fastens the rubber fuel line to the carburetor inlet. It is fastened with a clamp. The other end is fastened to the fuel pump outlet and hand tightened just enough to cause the ends of the line to curl outward. Ott has already connected the vacuum line to the pump. Mel removes the seal on the second vacuum line, which carries a slight pressure. He is careful to leave about a ½ inch space between the pump fitting and the end of the line. Now for the fuel balance line. It's in 2 sections and runs from the fuel pump to the air duct. It has already been blown clean of any possible dirt particles, of course. Ott fits his end at the air duct, and Mel takes care of the other end, the pump end.
Pinky, bring in that wrench and line. We got to clean up the rear and get going. Okay, fellas, swing her around again.
Lagging is no longer required on radial engines. For further information, consult Tech Order 02-1-44.
Lagging on those push rod housings has to be laced tightly to keep it from fraying. Bring in the cowl flaps, Ott. Attaboy. Remember, they're attached to the plates at the top and bottom of the support ring. These cowl splice bolts are special ones, you know, and, they must be tightened with heat-resistant steel nuts. Pinky, you can connect the struts to their respective bell cranks. Get the lead out, Chuck, and bring in the brackets. Got to get them on the rocker boxes. Attaboy. Time's a-wasting. Got to get this job finished pronto. Come on, Chuck, with the hoop, and we'll all go to work on it. Then we can give the old girl a good checking over and pin her up on the fortress where it belongs.